The word that I keep coming back to is uplifting. I have this conviction based on my lived experience that uplifting people or the planet doesn't have to be draining. It can actually feel uplifting to the person who's making that impact. Welcome to another episode of Uplifting Conversations. And this is another episode with founder and funder. We have Aaron Samuels from Collide Capital here with Sandra LaPlante from Papaya. And so welcome to the podcast. So excited. And I will say at the top, Uplifting Capital is an LP in Collide Capital, a very proud and a very happy LP. But felt like that needed to be disclosed at the top. But this isn't about that today. This is more about the impact that you two are having both collectively and individually, and just sharing the story behind that and unlocking what your uplifters' journeys have been. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So Aaron, would love to start with you. And first, just have you tell folks a little bit about Collide Capital and what that journey has been now. Raising this incredible fund and now deploying this fund and finding amazing entrepreneurs like present company. Just share a little bit about Collide and what the thinking was behind it and where you are now.
No, of course. And you're a proud LP. We are proud to have you as an LP as part of the team. So thank you, and it's an honor to be here on the podcast today. Collide Capital is a seed stage venture capital fund. We invest primarily in companies that have founders that have a Black, Latin, or female founder as part of the initial team of the company. We tend to invest at the seed stage. That means different things depending on who you ask. So I'll say philosophically, we're a seed stage firm. Sometimes that means pre-seed. Sometimes that means Series A. Sometimes it means seed extension. But ideally, we are investing in companies after they've been incorporated. This is not idea on a page. There's a real company to invest in. There's real traction. There's real progress. But before they've really hit escape velocity in terms of that inflection point of growth, when capital can still catalyze their journey. We're excited to do this work. My partner, Brian, was a career investor, Goldman Sachs, Lightspeed, Slow. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a founder. I founded a company called Blavity, grew it as chief operating officer. And so we like to bring both of those backgrounds to the table when we work with founders.
Yeah, no, I your entrepreneurial roots came through even talking to you about the fund when you guys were still out raising, the thoughtfulness with which you put together pitches, the thoughtfulness with which you put together the investment approach did not just kind of reflect thoughtful investors, but I felt like there were founder, operator fingerprints all over what you guys have built, which to me is a good thing. So, yeah.
Thank you. It's definitely true. Remains to be seen whether or not that's a good thing. But it has operator fingerprints all over it.
Oh, yeah. And Sandra, tell us a little bit about Papaya and what you guys have built and are building.
Yeah, of course. We are a curated marketplace, tech-enabled marketplace. And we believe that high-quality tutoring should be accessible to everybody, regardless of their socioeconomic status or native language or use racial profiles. So yeah, so that's what we believe in, and that's what we do. We work with school leaders in the U.S. to bring this high-quality tutoring to every student in the classroom.
Incredible. And Aaron, obviously you're an investor. What did you see in Papaya and in Sandra that really caught your eye and ultimately led you to invest?
Yeah, I mean, many things. She's an incredible person, and this is an incredible idea. I'd say before singing Sandra's praises, I'll say that in general, when we look for founders, we're looking for a particular kind of passion. Oftentimes, founders, companies, etc., when they go under, when they don't work, which by the way is most of the time. I think the most recent stat I saw was that 97% of venture-backed startups end up failing. So most of the time they fail. So why do they fail? oftentimes you fail for one of two reasons. You run out of money or you give up. So oftentimes what we're asking ourselves is, how do we know that this founder is going to be just as passionate 7 years from now about this idea as they are passionate about it today? And one of the ways that we look to identify that is looking for founders that for some reason believe they've identified a hole in the universe that they are uniquely qualified to be able to fill. And I think that passion came through immediately when we first met Sandra and started learning about what she was building, which at its core, and I'll let Sandra talk about it a little bit more, but at its core, it's an arbitrage opportunity. There are incredibly high amounts of overqualified tutors all over the world that are not able to get payment for their tutoring services because of differing abilities and access opportunities in their countries. And there is an overabundance of people that need tutoring services in the United States that can't afford those tutoring services locally and domestically. With the rise of Zoom and the rise of the kind of a more familiarity with kind of distributed education models and workplace models, with faster internet speeds and increasing access points, Sandra saw an opportunity to take advantage of this arbitrage scenario, and by doing so, create impact on both sides of this marketplace, and creating impact for these tutors that are abroad to be able to have access to new clients, and for an American clientele base that is in desperate need of these tutoring services. I thought that was a brilliant idea. I thought it was a brilliant approach. And you could tell within the first 30 seconds of meeting her that she was not going to stop until this was done.
Oh, my little impact investor heart is throbbing. We call it inclusion alpha, right? Like this whole idea that there is not only opportunity gaps to be filled, but actually financial return on the other side of creating more inclusive marketplaces like the one you're creating. So how did you stumble upon, how did you find this hole, Sandra, and what made this the hole in the universe, in Aaron speak, that you wanted to pursue fix?
He's so right about that hole in the universe. We do believe that. So I grew up in Peru, and I moved to the United States when I was 17. I did grow up semi-privileged, so my parents worked really hard to provide private schools, private tutors, etc. So when I came to the U.S., tutoring was normalized for me, right? But I didn't have the money. What wasn't normalized, it was how expensive it was. I was like, how much is it here? I was like, so I couldn't always access tutoring. And when I actually did save up the money, because I put myself through school, I would have trouble scheduling tutoring, right, with my tutors from here. So I needed to pass my classes. I was, studying engineering. I got an offer from a Fortune 500 company, and I was like, oh my God, no, I have to pass this class. If not, my dream job is gone. So I got a tutor from Peru because I found myself in a position where I had to make it, and there was no option. So I got a tutor from Peru. It was so accessible to me. I don't want to use the word cheap, but it was, the most accessible tutoring and the best one, right? Because I was able to relate. I think that also seeing somebody that looked like me on the other side of the screen, right, made me feel comfortable enough to say, I don't get these 10 times, right? And long story short, I passed my classes. I went to work for Accenture, which was the company that hired me. And they moved me to LA, in California, where I travel all over the West Coast to work for companies like Google, Facebook, Intel, Starbucks, merger and acquisitions. I mean, it was my dream job because that's what I wanted to do, right? And that's when I noticed that I never saw people of color. And I was like, why am I the only Latina here? Not even Latina, but why am I the only person of color? That's how it boiled down, right? Not even the only Hispanic, but just person of color. And that's when I realized that tutoring is only accessible to wealthy people, right? And that I had, quote unquote, hacked the system because I had access to tutoring, and therefore I was able to pass all of my classes. And majority of the people who I was sitting on the table with also had tutors or came from privilege, right? So I was like, well, what if tutoring was accessible to everybody, right? Because to me, tutoring is actually what's making the gap in education and between the people that have and have not even bigger, right? Usually tutoring is normalized in wealthy families, and like the people that need it the most don't have this resource that's making the gap even wider. So that's when I, and I also worked in Silicon Valley, and I also worked at Google and Facebook. That's why I was like, and I was a consultant, right? So I came to solve problems, and I, solve the problems that they had. And I was like, I can do this. I was like, I can make a company. And I was like, and that was my dream, right? To make tutoring accessible the way that Uber had made taxi cabs accessible, the way that Uber had made traveling accessible on a budget. So that was the dream, and that's when I quit my job and I, heard my calling, and it said like, this is the way that we can make the world a better place. It's not just for the, as Aaron said, right? Like a lot of companies fail, but to me, it's something that needs to be done. It's something that needs to happen, right? Like and I do see a lot of people who have a lot of potential in emerging markets that cannot find jobs. To me, that's not fair, right? Like if you're smart and you have the willingness to work, you should be able to open a computer and work. And there are so many people who need this accessible resource in the US. Right now that we're working with a lot of schools in the US, I notice how many kids are 2-3 years behind on grades, right? So, and if you think about it, kids that are really rich in AP classes, they have tutoring, so
it so resonates with me. And like, so there's something so profoundly empathetic about starting with this pain point that you had, this like this need that you knew because you had tutoring when you were in Peru and came here and became sort of excluded from access to something that you have. But instead of just hacking the system for yourself, you get to this point where you go, you know what? I see this problem is bigger than myself, and I'm going to give up whatever it is that I've attained in terms of personal success to go at this for other people. I think that's incredible. That's a testament to not only your vision, seeing this as something larger than yourself, but also there's just something that's deeply empathetic about that. And it completely resonates with me. I showed up at college totally unprepared from a study skill standpoint, right? And I fortunately felt like I had the ability to figure it out. I had an amazing guidance counselor who probably spent a little bit too much time with me and became my de facto tutor, kind of straightened me out and nudged me toward law school ultimately. But absent that person jumping, tutoring never even entered into my consciousness. It was never within my awareness. And I just imagine having something like Papaya where I would be able to affordably, which is the key word, right? Affordably connect with this resource. It could be a game changer for a lot of people. And I'd imagine this conversation is even more relevant now with what we're seeing in terms of admission standards changing, and people of color again being sort of under pressure, and the higher education system being back in the news. Can you talk a little bit about how you see Papaya of service in this climate in particular?
Yeah, of course. I mean, to your point, right now that within, new affirmative action being removed from our system, that's something that, really bothered me and it hurt me because I talked to so many friends who do not believe in affirmative action. And I'm like, I had a 3.4, but I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school, right? So my 3.4 is a 4.0. in my eyes, you didn't have to work. You had all the privilege, right? So to me, I think tutoring needs to be something that's, I think it just needs to be something that is accessible through the education system for everybody, right? Because i- if only rich people can afford it, then we're making this gap wider and wider. And now with the new affirmative action, I mean, we don't have the same resources. We weren't all born in rich families, right? And imagine not only like do rich families have kids in, with the best teachers, or like, right, like less problems, because let's be honest, the lack of money also brings problems, right? Like growing up in an environment where you see shootings, your friends dying. I mean, that's happened to one of our students. She was from Brooklyn, actually the Bronx, and she told me, she's like, I cannot come to tutoring because I just learned that one of my the kids that I used to babysit, he just got shot. And I'm like, that all of that brings problems. I mean, so I think that this is a resource that schools and colleges need to make available for everybody on a membership basis, right? Like I'm like, you get to access 10 hours of tutoring, right? Like, and make it more normalized. Like to me, tutoring is the new therapy, right? Like therapy used to be a taboo and you didn't want to have a shrink, but now it's so available to everybody because we made media around it. So I think we need to involve politics again and make it available. And especially with the lack of, teachers all over, right, in the education system. And I think one of the reasons why we switched Papaya, because we used to be only for college and like to families, we switched it to schools, is because I was invited to speak at the National Association of Bilingual Educators, where actually the Secretary of Education also spoke because he was an English learner when he was little from Puerto Rico. And when I heard that there were so many immigrant kids or kids who were English learners who didn't have teachers, in the classroom, I was like, we're more needed there. I was like, I found the niche. We have bilingual tutors, so we can help all of these kids that are usually left behind. So yeah, I mean, I do believe that it has to be available to everybody because we're leaving behind so many little Einsteins that we're not discovering because right? Like I struggled through algebra and I used to be like really good in math. And my dad hired the teacher himself to come teach me at night. Like I don't think that I realized I was privileged, right? But now I do. And I'm like, that's what rich families do in the US. And I think I had to have both experiences, right? Like growing up semi-privileged and being severely underprivileged when I came to the US, right? So I think I had to have those experiences to be like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. And I think that's like the hole in the universe that Aaron is talking about.
Yeah, no, and it's incredible how those intersections, that those places where we live uniquely become our opportunity to uniquely impact the world, right? I'm sure at some point that could have felt like a squeeze, right? Like there are points where you might have been too privileged in a certain environment and felt like that made you an outsider, not privileged enough in another environment where that makes you an outsider. And the integration of those two things brings something in you that allows you to affect the world like no one else can. I love that aspect of your story. And it's funny, you hear it showing up again and again in stories of people who are doing things that are truly impactful to the world. Like you are the one person in the world who could bring this to life. And it's incredible that you've done this. Yeah. Aaron, can you talk a little bit about how you see these patterns of, because you talked about this portfolio that reflects the diversity of your team and really reflects the diversity of the world, whether that's women founders, people of color. How has that showed up in investment opportunities? How do you see that as an advantage? You are absolutely looking for alpha. And so how does that bring you to founders of color or female founders on the teams you fund?
Yeah, absolutely. And so first I want to say that I believe that everybody should have access to opportunity. I don't think there's any disagreements about that on this particular call right here. But when we say, okay, where do you focus then? Where do you focus in that? Because of course we care about veterans. Of course we care about indigenous populations. Of course we care about people of differing abilities. Those are not things that Collide Capital explicitly focuses on, though, in our mandate. We focus specifically on Black, Latin, and female founders. Why is that? It's not just about equal opportunity or equal access to opportunity. It's also about the relative representation compared to the population index. And I think that that's something that Sandra and I are very like-minded about when we look at, okay, how do we do something that's disruptive? One of the reasons that we focus on Black founders is because, when you look at, Black people at around 10% of the U.S. population, but less than 1% of venture capital goes to Black founders, that is a mismatch with regards to population index. If people of Latin descent are around 20 to 25% of the U.S. population, but there are only 2% of venture capital is going to Latin founders, again, that's a population mismatch. And don't even get me started on women and their percentage of the population. Women get less than 1% of VC funding, which is a gross mismatch relative to population index, right? So and the reason that's important, it's a justice story, of course, but it's also just an overlooked opportunity. If we believe that the solutions of the future are going to be built by the people of the future, then we should at least be close to the population indices across fields. And when I talked to Sandra, she pointed out some very similar statistics when you look at the total workforce and when you look at population of the total workforce compared to the workforce in STEM jobs, or total workforce compared to workforce in technology jobs. We're also seeing Black and brown representation significantly lower than the relative indices of the population. We believe that access to tutoring services can help make a dent in some of these mismatches, which ultimately is, of course, good for the people that are receiving the tutoring service and, of course, good for the tutors. But it's also better for the field. It's better for the industry because we have the people that are being affected by these problems actually also being the people that are solving the problems. This cuts across everything.
Yeah. And we also invest with a racial equity lens and a gender equity lens. And I'll put the spotlight on you for a second here, Aaron, because I believe that fund managers or investors of color or female investors also are closing gaps and have advantages. Can you talk about how you and Brian have played to your strengths and why you guys have found yourself in positions of strength relative to investing in Black founders, relative to investing in Latinx founders or female founders?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's because we come from these communities. Point blank period. Brian was one of the co-founding board members of Black VC. Black VC is now the largest Black investor ecosystem in the world. He has helped, and his team has helped get hundreds of people access into the venture capital industry, created something called the Black Venture Institute that created multiple cohorts of new Black check writers, Black senior executives that want to write angel checks. So all the way through the venture stack, whether it's the incorporation of new funds, whether it's new Black check writers at senior levels writing angel checks, or getting Black folks into the associate and principal levels, Black VC is doing incredible work. And I spent 10 years running Blavity as chief operating officer. Blavity is now the largest Black media company in the world. And we created Afrotech, which is the largest Black tech conference in the world with a huge amount of access to Black founders. And so when Brian and I said we were going to create Collide Capital, we didn't say we were going to raise a bunch of money and then go look for founders. It was actually the opposite. We were already deeply embedded into these ecosystems of Black founders and Black investors. We just didn't have any money. And so we believed that once we raised this capital, we would be able to deploy it into folks that we knew were truly incredible. And thus far, that's what we've been up to. We've made 14 investments out of this newest fund. Out of our last fund, we did 33 or 34 investments. So we have an incredible portfolio now of founders. If you go to our website, collidecap.com/portfolio, We put the faces of our founders right on the website. You can see exactly who we invest in. We're not shy about it. We believe wholeheartedly in the people that we back.
I love it. So, and this is for both of you. Like it's a bold endeavor. It's a scary endeavor to start something from scratch in a highly competitive and not highly diverse field, whether that's starting a fund or whether that's founding a company. Sandra, I guess I'll start with you. Like, what gave you the courage to start, in the hope that you could be one of the few who survive, and certainly one of the few women of color who survive in the space?
This is gonna get really personal. I remember I was arguing with an ex-boyfriend at one point, and he said, "You're very relentless." And I was like, "I am." Like, and just in every area of my life, I'm very relentless, and I think that stuck with me a long time ago. And then I think I do it for the mission. Like, that's my main thing. Like, that it's it the right thing to do. It's important. It needs to be done, and I truly believe in it. Um, I think that I also have a lot of faith in God, and I think that I walk on faith a lot. Like, I think that um, like, I learned how to build technology. I work with in tech, in the biggest tech firm in the world. I work with the top tech companies in Silicon Valley, and I was good, and like, I lost I guess, the fear of building something. I love building. I think that product management was something that I really love. I love customer centricity. But I think the unique experiences that I had along my way, right? Like, we talked about me being like, growing up semi-privileged, being underprivileged as an immigrant here. I also put myself through college, and I was a server at Disney. So I think that being customer centric and customer service driven also helps me a lot in the UX and the UI, and bringing a unique experience for every student and for every school that we work with. And I do think that I'm the right person, that there's a reason why I'm here, and there's a reason why I've been so blessed to do this. So yes, I think that I have a lot of great relentless. I don't give up. um, and it just feels like my calling. And like, I think that walking away from a very cushy corporate job um, was probably one of the hardest things to do, because I have to give up a lot of my lifestyle, right? Like, um, and a lot of my savings. But I think that I'm also way too deep. So I'm just like, I can't give up now. We have to keep going. So yeah, I think that that's why like, I think that I believe in myself, and I believe in the mission a lot. And I think that if God put a dream inside of you, that means that has to become a reality, right? Like, I think that everybody's dreams, like, I think we're all living in somebody's dream, right? Like, I think that we're living in MLK's dream, right? Like, little by little, God puts dreams in everybody to make the world a better place.
Speaking to my soul right now. Well, we are very grateful for your relentlessness, because we're grateful for what you're putting out into the world. Aaron, you were pretty comfortable yourself. Why strike out and start this crazy thing that now in the rearview mirror doesn't seem so crazy with Brian?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to sound cheesy, but Sandra's on the line, so we'll just say it. Like, it's so we can back founders like Sandra. We built Blavity. I'm proud of it. I'm incredibly proud of it. Blavity is one of the things I'm most proud of in my life. We built something that we weren't supposed to do. We weren't supposed to take on, the large media conglomerates. We weren't supposed to create something that was going to benefit Black people and we weren't supposed to celebrate our joy, and we did it despite that. But the world doesn't get better by the existence of just one Blavity, and could, and while we definitely broke barriers. I mean, at the time that we raised, we were one of 25 companies with a Black woman CEO that had ever raised more than $1 million. And that's to just be very clear, that's in the history of the world. Which is just absurd. These days, that number, it's not that much better. That was in kind of, I think that was in 2016 that list came out. These days, the number still hovers around 100. That's abysmal when you think about the billions and billions of dollars of capital that were lost in value over the past 6 months with the market correction. The world is better because Blavity exists. I think the world will be even better if 100 Blavities exist. I think it's even better if 1,000 Blavities exist, which means we have to do more than just be comfortable and continue to operate what we've built. It's why all of the founders of Blavity, me, Morgan, Jeff, and Jonathan, have all, outside of Blavity, found ways of giving back to the ecosystem, creating nonprofits. And, my way of doing that was through Collide Capital, so that I can back people like Sandra building Papaya, and the other founders in our portfolio.
Incredible. I mean, yeah, I'm particularly inspired by both of you. How can folks who are listening support you, Sandra, your work, whether that's potential customers or potential investors or otherwise? How can we support your work?
Well, I think introductions to, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people in your network would know the right people in education, and we're talking probably at the state level. So that would be great. We're trying to, make it big in Texas, also Illinois, specifically Chicago, and other states that we want to, start spreading and setting roots in. To begin with would be California, Florida, Maryland, New York. And we're talking about the states, right, that have a high influx of immigrants right now, whose education systems don't know what to do with this number of immigrants that are coming every day, that are going to school without speaking the language. And then second, I was just talking to Aaron right now about our press release. So it'd be great to have some interest to some media resources, so we can start spreading the word about Papaya and what we're doing, not only for the U.S., but for the economic development of the world, right? Like of the emerging markets. So, yeah.
Incredible. All right. And Aaron, how can we be supportive of you?
Yeah. So, there's a bunch of ways. But I guess before answering that question directly, I also just want to point out that even that question in this particular container, I think, is something that's really beautiful. And I think we should all just take a moment to acknowledge, because this doesn't happen a lot. This right here in this moment is a podcast where we have a Black LP who deployed capital into a 100% Black-owned GP and venture capital firm, and then we at Collide Capital then deployed that money into a Latina owned and operated solo founder startup. And so I think this is an example of the type of circular ecosystem that we need to be creating. This is POC solidarity. This is impact, and it's also arbitrage opportunity. Yeah, it's incredible. And so more of this is what I'll say. So for the listeners, what are ways that you can continue giving back and investing in ecosystems, investing in solidarity with people of color, investing in solidarity with immigrants and immigrant founders. Use Toussaint as an example, but let's not have that example be an exception. Let's make it the rule. Let's make this the norm. And so I want to shout you out and also encourage more of this work and more of this work from your listener base.
Appreciate you. Yeah, the world is better if 1,000 upliftings exist, for sure. So
Indeed.
we need to continue to pull resources and pour into each other. In closing, I'll ask each of you, what does uplifting mean to you?
Should I go first?
Go for it.
To me, it's papaya. To me, it's looking back and extending your arm and uplifting somebody that is going through the same journey, right? To me, I'm doing both. The people, of color that are in the U.S. that cannot afford tutoring, I've been through that. And I know if I would have stayed in Peru, would have loved to have a part-time job that can provide, while I'm in college. So both of them, I think that to me is uplifting, right? Like helping somebody, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and telling them that their past doesn't have to define their future. So.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to top that.
You're not.
Yeah, I agree. If there's anything that I add, it's each one teach one. It's making sure that for whatever weird combination of luck, fate, skill, privilege, we have all found ourselves in positions of power. And I think too often folks find themselves in position of power, and instead of holding the door open to let other people in, they close the door behind them, or maybe passively they let the door close behind them without making more of an active effort to prop it open. And I think what the two of you do on this call, what we try to do at Collide Capital as well, is once we achieve some level of power, some position, instead of using that to climb kind of outside or beyond our community, instead rather we say, no, now this new landing, this new precipice, this is now where our community lives. We all live here now. Let's keep the door open. Let's let everybody in. Let's help everybody up. And for me, that's what uplifting.
With a heart full of gratitude, I will say, Sandra and Aaron, you are uplifting to me. I appreciate you guys joining the conversation, and this has been incredible. I know it's going to be of service to many people, so thank you.
Please be sure to subscribe, like, and click the notification button so you never miss an episode.